debate and amendments to the bill, the final vote possible this evening. This afternoon at about 2:30, the Senate will stop work on the bill to pay tribute to Senator Barbara Mikulski. She is now the longest-serving female member of Congress. And now to live coverage of the U.S. Senate here on C-SPAN 2.
The Senate will come to order. The chaplain, Dr. Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. O God, who loves us without ceasing, we turn our thoughts toward you. Remain with our senators today, so that for no single instance they will be unaware of your providential power. We thank you for your infinite love that permits us to make mistakes, yet still grow in grace and a knowledge of you. Lord, save us from any evil course or idle path that leads away from your will. Today we pray for the President of the United States and for the leaders in every land. Help them to bear their responsibilities with honor. And Lord, today we also thank you for the amazing career of Senator Barbara Mikulski. We pray in your holy name. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., March 21, 2012. To the Senate, under the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Kirsten E. Gillibrand, a senator from the state of New York, to perform the duties of the chair. Signed, Daniel K. Inouye, President pro tempore.
Madam President.
Majority Leader.
Following leader remarks, the Senate will be in a period of morning business for an hour. The majority will control the first half, Republicans the final half. Following that morning business, the Senate will resume consideration of the capital formation bill. At approximately 1:40 this morning, there will be a cloture vote on the IPO bill. Announce the business of the day.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will be in a period of morning business for 1 hour, with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each, with the time equally divided and controlled between the two leaders or their designees, with the majority controlling the first half and the Republicans controlling the final half.
Madam President.
Senator from Illinois.
Ask consent to be recognized to speak in morning business.
Without objection.
Madam President, there's been a lot of discussion about the Affordable Health Care Act passed by Congress. In fact, just next week, across the street, the Supreme Court will take up this bill and decide whether it's constitutional. It's an important decision. It's one that will affect millions of Americans, and scarcely anyone understands the impact of this law and what it means to their daily lives. The first thing I want to say about it is the most controversial aspect of it is the so-called mandate, individual mandate. What is it? From my point of view, it is a basic method of saying to everyone in America, you have a personal responsibility here. You cannot say, I'm just not going to buy any health insurance. I don't think I'm ever going to need it, and I'm not going to worry about it. The problem is, of course, those people who make that statement get sick. Some of them get involved in accidents. Some go to a doctor and are diagnosed with terrible illnesses and diseases that require treatment and surgery that cost a lot of money. The uninsured people show up at the hospitals. They're not pushed away. They're invited in. They receive the treatment. And then they can't pay for it. It turns out that 63% of the medical care given to uninsured people in America isn't paid for. Not by them. It turns out that the rest of us pay for it. Everyone else in America who has health insurance has to pick up the cost of those who did not accept their personal responsibility to buy health insurance. So what? What difference does that make? It makes a difference. It adds $1,000 a year to our health insurance program. In other words, you and me and everyone with health insurance, we're subsidizing those people who say, don't mandate anything on me, don't tell me I have a personal responsibility, but when I get sick, you can pay for it. That's what the individual mandate comes down to. And I listen to those who say, well, this is just too darn much government to say that people who can afford it need to have health insurance. Keep in mind, this Affordable Health Care bill said if you cannot afford it, if you're too poor or your income is limited, there's a helping hand there, not only in the tax code, but even through Medicaid, to make sure that you have affordable health care insurance, which will never cost you more than 8% of your income. A lot of American families would jump at health insurance that only cost 8% of their income, but the law says you have to be willing to pay up to 8% of your income to have health insurance. And the reason, of course, is if they don't pay, everyone else pays. They get sick. They cost us $116 billion a year in uncompensated health care coverage paid for those who do not accept their personal responsibility to buy health insurance. Ruth Marcus has an article in this morning's Washington Post. I ask consent that it be entered into the record.
Without objection.
And this article, thank you, Madam President, this article spells it out. This issue of an individual mandate is an issue of personal responsibility. If you believe someone should be able to walk away from their responsibility to have health insurance coverage that they can afford, and that their medical bills should be your family's responsibility, then cheer on all these folks who are saying, we're going to repeal Obamacare. That's what it boils down to. Do you want to pay their bills? I don't think we should have to. I think everybody in this country should accept that responsibility. There are some other aspects of the Affordable Health Care Act which you don't hear talked about for those who are calling for its repeal. Let me tell you one. Do you have a child graduating from college looking for a job? I've been in that circumstance. My wife and I raised 3 children. Some of them found a job, took a little while. And while they were looking for a job, did you ever say to your son or daughter fresh out of college, how about health insurance? You know what they probably said to you? Sorry, Mom. Sorry, Dad. Can't do that now. When I get a job, I'll get back to it. But I feel just fine. I feel just fine. Doesn't work that way. And any responsible parent knows it. So we changed the law. Here's what we said. If you have family health insurance, it can cover your son or daughter up to the age of 26. That expanded the reach of health insurance coverage. It covered these young college graduates and young people looking for work so that they had that protection even when they were unemployed. So did it make any difference? Thanks to this provision, 2.5 million young people have gained coverage nationwide. 102,000 plus in my state of Illinois. That means for 2.5 million parents some peace of mind that their kids are covered by the family plan. That was part of this bill, which many Republican presidential candidates are saying they want to repeal. Really? Want to explain that to 2.5 million families who have the peace of mind that their son or daughter is covered with health insurance up to the age of 26? And how about the seniors paying for their Medicare prescription drugs bills? There was this donut hole. You know what that means? It means that if you have prescription drugs covered by Medicare and they are expensive, they'll reach a point during the course of a year when you have to go into your savings to pay for about $2,000 worth of prescription drugs before the government comes back and starts helping you again. We start closing that donut hole, closing that gap, giving $250 of that $2,000 they have to pay back to people in rebate initially, and then providing a discount on drugs for seniors. That's part of affordable care. That's part of what the Republicans scream is Obamacare. Is it a good idea? Well, just ask 152,000 Medicare recipients in Illinois who have received this rebate to help pay for their prescription drugs. Ask 144,000 seniors in Illinois who have received a 50% discount on drug costs, and then ask the millions across America who are benefited. People on fixed incomes and limited savings, we're giving them a helping hand so that they can have the prescription drugs they need to be healthy and strong and safe and independent. Is that what you want to be when you're a senior? Most of us do, and this bill helps. The third thing it does is to basically cover preventive services. We all know the story here. Get in and see a doctor for a colonoscopy, for a mammogram. Early detection and treatment is money saved and lives saved. We extended preventive care under Medicare. For 1.3 million Medicare recipients in Illinois, just in my state, 1.3 million, more in your state, Madam President, they have preventive care now. They didn't have before. It means they're more likely to stay healthy longer and cost less to our health care system. Oh, that's another thing that they want to repeal. Those who are running against the Affordable Care Act, running against the health care bill that President Obama has pushed for. There's also a provision that says that insurance companies have to spend 80% of the premiums they collect, 80% on actual medical care. They can take 20% for profits and administrative costs and the like, but 80% on actual medical care. The state of Minnesota already had that on the books, and it worked, and we said let's do it nationwide. So that if premiums go up, it's to reimburse health care, not to take it out in profits, not to take it out in bonuses, not to spend it on an advertising budget for an insurance company. That's a big change. The insurance companies hate it like the devil hates holy water, and the Republican presidential candidates want to repeal it. I think it's a sensible change to insurance coverage and one that we ought to protect, not one that we ought to prohibit. There are other provisions in this law as well. The one that affects me personally and has affected, I'm sure, thousands of Americans is the question of pre-existing condition. Do you have one? A lot of people do. A lot of people don't even know they have one. Sometimes insurance companies dream them up. They would deny coverage for health insurance if somebody had, get ready, acne. Pre-existing condition, no coverage. That sort of thing tells, or if there's a history in your family of suicide, they would deny you health care coverage, pre-existing condition. Let me just say to every parent listening here, thank the Lord if your child doesn't have asthma, diabetes, or something more serious. Because until the Affordable Care Act was passed, that was enough to disqualify your child and maybe your family from health insurance coverage. Oh, they can't wait to repeal that. Let's repeal Obamacare. Let's get rid of that pre-existing condition provision. Let those insurance companies deny coverage. America, is that what you want? Is that what you're looking for? Is that too much government to say to insurance companies, you can't deny children under the age of 18 insurance coverage, health insurance coverage, if they are victims of diabetes, if they've had a bout with cancer, if they have asthma? Oh, some of these folks are for the Wild West. Get government out of my life. I will tell you this. We know that sensible regulation of insurance coverage gives people peace of mind, gives families a chance to know that their child with a challenge or a problem is still going to get the very best medical care. Something called lifetime limits, there's another one. You go into the doctor and the doctor says, well, sorry to tell you, you've been diagnosed with a form of cancer. We can treat it. It's going to take aggressive chemo or radiation, maybe even surgery. It's going to take some time and it's going to cost some money, but at the end of the day, we're going to save your life. You're going to live. You're going to live to see your daughter's wedding. You're going to live to see your grandchild. And then you get into it and you say, I'm determined, my family's with me, I'm going to pray for it, and I'm going to get the right outcome. And guess what happens? It turns out the cost of that blows the lid off your health insurance coverage. You had a lifetime limit on how much they would pay. Lifetime limit. You never thought you'd use it until that kind of diagnosis comes down. So now we basically have said we're removing lifetime limits on health care. That's part of Obamacare. That's part of the Affordable Care Act. So I say to my Republican friends and those running for president, you want to go to the American Cancer Society and enter into a debate with them about whether lifetime limits are the right thing to do? They're going to explain to you with thousands and thousands of American examples of why people with lifetime limits end up in a tragic situation where they need more coverage, they need more care, they can save their lives, and their health care coverage is cut off. That was the old days. That was before the Affordable Care Act. So those who want to repeal it, and boy, they stand up and get cheering crowds. In those cheering crowds are cancer patients. They ought to stop and think before they start cheering what they're cheering for. Madam President, the Affordable Care Act was a sensible, reasonable step in a direction toward containing health care costs and making health care insurance coverage fairer for Americans all across our nation. Is it a perfect law? Of course not. As I've said many times, the only perfect law I'm aware of was carried down a mountain on clay tablets by Senator Moses. Ever since, we've done our best. We can always do better, and I'm open to change. I'm open to improvement. But for those who want to walk away from the Affordable Care Act, listen to what they're walking away from. They are imposing a $1,000 premium on families to pay for the uninsured who won't accept their personal responsibility health insurance. They are walking away from helping for seniors pay for their Medicare prescription drugs. They are turning their back on families with young children fresh out of college looking for jobs and no health insurance coverage. They are inviting the insurance companies to once again turn down your child and your family because of a pre-existing condition. They're saying once again, let's get into the world of lifetime limits on insurance no matter how much health care costs. That's their idea of a future, not mine, not my family's. I've lived through part of this. Many others have as well. So when you hear the cheering crowds about repealing Affordable Care Act, hoping that the Supreme Court finds some aspect unconstitutional, step back and ask those cheering crowds about their own health insurance. The last thing I want to say is this. It's interesting that senators are debating this. You ought to see our health insurance. You ought to see what we have as members of Congress. We have the Federal Employees Health Benefit Program. Guess what? It's a government-administered program. Oh, my goodness. You mean Republican senators are part of a government-administered health care program? Yes. And you mean to tell me they have to deal with an insurance exchange? Yes. That's what the Federal Employees Health Benefit Program is. 8 million federal employees and their families choose once a year, in my case, from 9 different plans that cover Illinois. We like our coverage in my family. Federal employees like their coverage. Senators like their coverage. But when it comes to extending the same benefit to every other American, oh, what a horror story. That's too much government. Really? If you are a person of principle and believe that a government-administered health care plan is too much government, step up here in the well and tell people I'm giving up my federal health insurance. I haven't heard a single Republican senator say that. Not one. So let's find out. When we come down to the question about health care insurance for all Americans, I think they deserve at least the kind of coverage that members of Congress have. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Republican leader.
For the past several months, I and others have been calling on the Democratic majority here in the Senate to take up and pass the various bipartisan jobs bills that House Republicans have been sending across the dome. These bills on their own certainly won't solve the jobs crisis, but they'll make it a lot easier for entrepreneurs and innovators to get the capital they need to build businesses and create jobs. And because these bills are more concerned with getting Washington out of the way than getting it more involved, these bills also send an important message that the economy and the country are a lot better off when folks have more control over their economic destinies, not less. Last night we were on the cusp of passing a collection of bills known as the Jobs Act. This bill had overwhelming bipartisan support in the House. Nearly 400 members voted for it. And the President himself says that it will create jobs. He supports it and would sign it into law. Unfortunately, a handful of Democrats here in the Senate want to slow it down. They denied Americans this bipartisan victory for jobs that we could have had last night. So this morning, I would ask our friends on the other side to reconsider I would ask them to put the politics aside and to allow this bipartisan bill to actually move forward. We could pocket this achievement and move on to other measures, including the reauthorization of the Export-Import Bank, which I suggested yesterday. One bill alone can't undo the damage inflicted on the economy by this administration, but it sure could help. And we need to show the American people that we can do this. This bill is exactly the kind of thing Americans have been asking for: greater freedom and greater flexibility. And that's one of the reasons it had such overwhelming bipartisan support. At a moment when millions are looking for work and Democrats say they want more bipartisan action on jobs, this is it. We're in the middle of March Madness here. To use a basketball metaphor, this is a layup. Let's get it done. On another matter, this week marks the 2-year anniversary of the President's health care law, one that's often described as his signature legislative achievement. But you wouldn't know it based on the President's schedule this week. For a President who isn't particularly shy about taking credit, even for things he didn't have anything to do with, he's curiously silent this week about a bill he talked about for more than a year before it passed. According to news reports, the President doesn't even plan to mark the occasion. Well, we're happy. Republicans are very happy to talk about it for him, even though he's reluctant. We're happy to point out the ways in which this law has failed to live up to the promises the President made about it. We're happy to make the case for why this unconstitutional infringement on America's liberties needs to be repealed and replaced with the kind of common sense reforms that Americans actually want. 2 years ago, then Speaker Pelosi said we have to pass this bill so we can find out what's in it. Well, 2 years later, here's what we have found so far. The Democrats' health care law has led and will continue to lead to higher costs and hundreds of thousands of fewer jobs over the next decade. We now know that it's loaded with broken promises, like the one the President made over and over again during the health care debate. He said, if you like your current plan, you'll be able to keep it. According to the independent Congressional Budget Office, 3 to 5 million Americans will lose their current plan each year under the most likely scenario. The health care law will strip billions out of Medicare and increase the Medicaid rolls in states by nearly 25 million, costing already cash-strapped states an additional $118 billion and almost certainly lowering the quality of care for millions of Americans who depend on this vital program. In my state of Kentucky, an estimated 387,000 more people will be forced into Medicaid at a time when Kentucky's Medicaid program is already facing huge deficits just trying to provide benefits to current Medicaid recipients. As a result of this law, more than 1 million Kentuckians, or 29% of my state's population, will soon be on Medicaid. Kentucky's governor, a Democrat, is on record saying he has no idea how Kentucky will meet its responsibilities if the law forces several 100,000 more people into the state's Medicaid program. The math simply doesn't add up. And this is just one example of how the law is unsustainable and hurts the most vulnerable the most. The bottom line is this health care law is an absolute mess, a mess. And the American people don't want it. According to the Washington Post ABC News poll out this week, more than half of Americans don't like it, a figure that hasn't changed much at all since the Democrats forced it through Congress 2 years ago. And 2/3 believe the Supreme Court should throw out the individual mandate or the whole law. When it comes to the cost of health care, this law makes everything worse. 2.5 years ago, the President said his health care plan would, quote, slow the growth of health care costs for our families, our businesses, and our government. Yet the Obama administration itself now admits total spending on health care will increase by $311 billion under the President's health care law. According to the CBO, it increases net federal health spending and subsidies on health care by $390 billion and drives up premiums on families by $2,100 per year. Americans wanted lower costs and to have more control of their health care decisions, and they got the opposite instead. They wanted lower premiums. They got higher premiums. They wanted a government that lives within its means, and they got a new entitlement instead. They wanted more options. They got fewer. They wanted better care. It's going to be worse. And that's why Americans want this bill repealed. Look, this bill would be unconstitutional even if it did the things the President said it would. But the fact that it did the opposite of what he promised means it should be repealed either way, whether the constitutionality of it is upheld or not. It should say something when the President himself isn't even talking about this bill except in closed campaign events. It's time to repeal this bill and replace it with the kind of common sense reforms that people really want. Reforms that actually lower costs, that protect jobs and state budgets, and return health care decisions back to individuals and their doctors. That's a reform that both parties and all of Americans could support. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Illinois.
Madam President, those who followed this debate know that members can disagree, and obviously I disagree with the Republican leader on the issue of health care reform. I would say that there are a couple elements I would add. Yes, we expand the Medicaid rolls. That's health insurance for those in low-income categories. But the federal government picks up the tab. It's not an added expense to the state governments for 4 or 5 years, and we're hoping their economy gets better. What about the millions of 1 million Kentuckians who are going on the Medicaid rolls? Those 1 million Kentuckians have no health insurance today. Will they ever get sick? Will they ever show up at the hospital? Yes, they will. Who will pay for their bills? The rest of the folks living in Kentucky with health insurance and the rest of us. Is that fair? Do these people have a personal responsibility to have health insurance as long as we help them if they're in lower income categories, pay the premiums with tax breaks and enrolling them in Medicaid? Of course they do. Accepting personal responsibility used to be the first thing the Republicans told us about their family values. Well, why don't people have to accept personal responsibility and have health insurance so the cost of their care isn't borne by their neighbors and the rest of America? And let me just also add again, members of the United States Senate have a government-administered health care program that protects them, their family, and their children. They sign up for it every single year, and not a single one has come to the well here and said, I'm so opposed to government-administered programs, I'm going to stop enrolling in the health insurance program for members of Congress. Not a one. I see my colleague from Colorado is on the floor, and he's going to speak to an amendment which is very important. The Republican leader addressed an aspect of it. I'll just say a very short, brief comment. If we want to create jobs in this country, we know how to do it. We passed a bill here just last week, 74 to 22, a bipartisan bill. What a miracle, huh? Bipartisan bill passes the Senate. A bill that would create 2.6, maybe 2.8 million jobs, create and save that many jobs in this economy. A bill that will help the American economy expand in the 21st century. What could it possibly be? It's called the Federal Transportation Bill. We do it every 5 years, and if we don't do it, if we don't build the roads, the bridges, the airports, sustain passenger rail service and Amtrak, make certain that we have mass transit and buses around America, our economy starts to contract instead of grow. We passed this bill with a strong bipartisan vote, thanks to Senator Boxer and Inhofe, Democrat, Republican, progressive, conservative, all came together on this bill. We sent it over to the House of Representatives, and they said, sorry, we're not going to take it up. We won't vote on it. We're going to send you a bill that allows people to create new startups, these new private companies, and we're going to eliminate the regulation that makes sure that investors don't get fleeced. That's how we want to create jobs. Well, that's like that America has amnesia. We remember the subprime mortgage mess when a lot of unsuspecting people were dragged into offices and into mortgages they had no idea were going to explode when the balloon burst. Now, once again, the Republicans have said the best way to create jobs in the future is to let that happen when it comes to the sale of stock in new companies. I'm with Mary Shapiro, Commissioner of the Securities and Exchange Commission. She's warned us we need to put protections in this bill. It is not going to create the jobs they talk about. It's going to endanger investors. I yield the floor to the Senator from Colorado.
Madam President.
Senator from Colorado.
Thank you, Madam President. I thank the Senator for Illinois for his leadership and agree that it's vital that we pass this transportation bill. Madam President, in my town halls we talk about a lot of things that are very different from the things that people argue about in this place. And one of the things that we talk about are the structural issues that are facing this economy. And we talk about these 4 lines. The first is our gross domestic product, the economic output of the United States of America, which is higher today than it was before we went into this recession. A lot of people don't know that. We're producing more than we were producing before we went into the recession. Our productivity has gone up dramatically since the early 90s as we've responded to competition from China and India and other places, as we've used technology to enhance our economic output. We have the most productive economy that we have ever seen. But we also face some very potentially catastrophic circumstances in this economy, one of which is that median family income has fallen for the last 10 years, the first time that's happened in our country's history. And the other is that we've got 23 or 24 million people who are unemployed or underemployed in an economy that's producing what it was producing before the recession happened. That's a structural issue. I've spoken on this floor about the importance of education in that context, because the worst the unemployment rate ever got for people with a college degree during the worst recession since the Great Depression was 4.5%. That's a pretty good stress test of the value of a college education. But the other thing we need to make sure we're doing as a country is continuing to innovate and continuing to drive innovation across the United States, because it's those companies, the one that's created tomorrow, the one that's created next week, that's going to create new jobs here in this country, that's going to drive our median family income up instead of down. And that's why I'm on the floor today, Madam President, to talk about a bipartisan bill, a bill that Senator Merkley and Senator Brown and I have worked on crowdfunding. And it's an amendment that I hope will come to the floor, and I hope we can get to a vote. Over the past months, we've worked together in a bipartisan way on a crowdfunding proposal that would allow crowdfunding to thrive, but would also contain an appropriate level of oversight and investor protection. We've done something very unusual in this town. We took time to listen to people, and we listened to crowdfunding platforms, entrepreneurs, and investor protection advocates, many of whom support this bill and have endorsed this bill. We've worked hard to incorporate their ideas, and as a result, we've got a bipartisan amendment that has the support of both businesses and consumer advocates. That's something that doesn't happen that frequently in this town, and I hope that we have the chance to vote on it. I would urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to see this as a real opportunity to take one step, not a huge step, but one important step forward to filling this gap that we see here, to creating an economy again where rising economic output also means rising wages, and the rising economic output also means growing jobs. This crowdfunding amendment is a chance to do it. It's bipartisan. Madam President, I have some letters of support I'd ask to enter into the record.
Without objection.
It moves this ball down the field. I hope it establishes a model for how we can work together to make sure that we're actually addressing the things that I'm hearing in the town halls, and that we're driving wage growth and job growth here in the United States. And with that, Madam President, I see my colleague on the other side, and I will yield the floor.
Madam President, we are in morning business, are we not?
We are.
I rise to speak on the second-year anniversary of the Health Care Patient Protection and Affordable Care Law. I will be joined shortly by a few of my colleagues, and I would ask unanimous consent that at that point we engage in a colloquy.
Without objection.
Thank you. Madam President, on Friday of this week, 2 years will have passed since President Obama signed the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act into law. This actually is a sad anniversary, because more than enough time has gone by to reveal the failures of this massive, burdensome piece of legislation. The fact that 26 of our 50 states, more than half of the states, are part of the legal challenge currently under review by the Supreme Court, points out the inevitable truth. This is a law that simply does not work. The case, which will be argued in a few days, will be one of the most consequential Supreme Court cases of my lifetime. Consequential not only because it deals with this massive, burdensome piece of legislation, but because the implications go so much farther. The implications of this Supreme Court case will decide the scope of the Commerce Clause. And indeed, Madam President and my colleagues, if the Supreme Court decides that this law can withstand constitutional scrutiny, then this large, massive federal government can in fact do almost anything, and there will in fact be hardly any limitations under the Constitution and the Bill of Rights on the power of the United States federal government. Americans are right to be disappointed with Obamacare, and they're right to want a repeal. And regardless of the outcome of the Supreme Court case, this Congress can decide, and as a matter of fact, the people of the United States will have a chance in November, as we do every 2 years, to decide. A recent Gallup poll shows that twice as many Americans think the law will make things worse for their families than those who believe it will make things better. 72% of Americans believe the individual mandate is unconstitutional. The truth is that Americans deserve affordable, high-quality health care, not a 2,700-page big government piece of legislation that taxes, spends, and regulates. The President's health care law has not lowered the cost of health care as promised. It has not created jobs as promised. It has not reduced the deficit as promised. And so this week, we mark an anniversary, not with progress, but with bitter realities. President Obama, in his joint session to Congress in 2009, asserted that his plan, quote, will slow the growth of health care costs for our families, our businesses, and our government. In fact, last week, the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office and Joint Committee on Taxation updated their outlook of the health care law's impact on the federal budget. Not surprisingly, their latest analysis says Obamacare will cost even more than anticipated, and the anticipated costs were high indeed. But they say that the health care law will cost nearly $1.8 trillion over the next decade, or double the estimated cost that accompanied the bill when Democratic supermajorities passed it in 2010. This is hardly the relief that President Obama promised. During his campaign, the President said the plan would reduce health care premiums by an average of $2,500 per family. Instead, premiums have grown by nearly that much since he was elected. I see I'm joined here by two of my colleagues, the distinguished senator from Wyoming and the distinguished senator from Kansas. There are a number of other promises that we can talk about today, and I know we don't impugn motives around here. It's against the rules. But one has to wonder, did advocates of this massive law actually believe these promises, or were they simply duped and misled? And I don't know which is worse, but I know that my colleague, Dr. Barrasso, himself a physician who's on the front line of this issue, has given this a great deal of thought. And so at this point, I'd ask him to join into this colloquy.
Well, Madam President, and I stand here with my friend and colleague from Mississippi because he and I both attended in his home state of Mississippi a meeting at a hospital where we met with doctors, also met with patients, met with people from the community while the debate and the discussion was being conducted about this health care law. And at the time, people were asking the sorts of questions because they had heard the promises. Would this actually lower the cost of insurance by $2,500 a family? That's what people wanted. That's what they expected. The other question, will I really be able to keep the care that I have and the doctor that I have if I like it? And now here we are, a couple of years later, the second anniversary of this health care law being passed, and I'm here with my friend and colleague from Mississippi, and it just seems to me that the questions that were asked by your constituents, by the doctors in those communities who take care of the patients, by the patients, the hospital administrators that we talked to that day in his home state of Mississippi, and it does seem that many of these promises have been broken. The costs seem to go up higher than had this health care law not been passed at all. The numbers and the statistics that we're hearing now from the budget office on the cost seem to be much, much higher than what the President promised. Parts of this health care law, the so-called Class Act, it now comes out where accounting gimmicks, budget schemes to make it seem like the cost of the health care law would be much less than what the American people now know it to be. So it's no surprise to me, and I see this in Wyoming, and I'm sure you see it in Mississippi, and I would imagine that the senator from Kansas who is on the floor has seen the same thing at home, because I know he has gone to hospitals in just maybe almost every hospital in the state of Kansas as he's traveled around. And, you know, what we're all seeing is this health care law is even less popular now than when it was passed. That's what I hear at town hall meetings. And when I ask, do you think that you're going to actually pay more under the health care law? Every hand goes up. And when you say, do you think the quality and availability of your own care at home is going to go down? Again, every hand goes up. So if I could ask my colleague from Kansas if he's hearing the same things, and then I know we're also joined by the senator from Arizona.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to join my colleagues on the Senate floor today, and especially the senator from Wyoming, the doctor, who is such an expert on the topic of really not just the moment, not just the day, but the topic of what our country faces. And I would tell you that I do spend a lot of time in hospitals across our state, talking to health care providers, talking to patients, to doctors, to administrators, trustees. In fact, there's 128 hospitals in our state. I have visited all of them. And there is just genuine concern about the future of the ability for health care to be delivered in communities across our state. And you add to that the physician and other health care provider community. This Health Care Reform Act is creating significant challenges. And my interest in public service started a long time ago with the belief that we live our lives in rural America, in my state of Kansas, in a pretty special way. When I came to Congress, it became clear to me that if our communities were going to have a future, that it was dependent upon the ability to deliver health care close to home. And those rural communities across our nation often have high proportions of senior citizen populations where Medicare is the primary determining factor of whether or not they can access health care. And so when the Affordable Care Act was passed, many promises were made. But one of the things that was sold to the American people, or at least the attempt was made to sell to the American people, is there will be greater access. And I would certainly say that one of the promises that is not being kept about the Affordable Care Act is the likelihood that there is going to be greater access for Americans across our country to health care. Because this bill is underfunded, it's not paid for. The consequences are that the administration is already proposing, Congress will always be looking for ways to reduce spending when it comes to health care, and the most likely target is the payments that Medicare makes to health care providers, which in many instances already doesn't cover the cost of providing the service. And so when we look for access to health care, every time we make a decision every time a decision will be made in order to try to make this more affordable, we're going to see fewer and fewer providers able to provide the services necessary to folks across the country, but especially in rural communities where 60, 70, 80, even 90% of the patients admitted to the hospital are on Medicare. So one of the problems with the Affordable Care Act is the reality that it will reduce the access to health care by people who live in rural America, and we will see fewer physicians accepting patients on Medicare. We will see fewer hospital doors remain open, all done in a way that, as this bill takes $500 billion out of Medicare to begin with, we set, the Congress that passed this, the President who signed this legislation, set the stage for there to be less affordable health care available to Americans across the country, but for especially constituents of mine who live in a rural state like Kansas.
If I could jump in on the issue of Medicare, because I have a quote here from President Obama, July 29, 2009, quoting specifically from the President, "Medicare is a government program, but don't worry, I'm not going to touch it." As a matter of fact, only months later, he signed into law the Obamacare Act, which takes $500 billion from Medicare, and it touches on the very issue that the senator from Kansas was referring to with regard to Medicare access for people in rural Kansas. I yield to my friend from...
My friend from Mississippi, that the First Amendment that we had on the floor of the Senate when we were considering Obamacare was to restore that $500 billion, and it was voted down on a party line basis. I want to thank my friends for allowing me to engage in this colloquy. I'd like to discuss with my friends probably, in my view, what really encapsulates the problems with this legislation. The commitment was that we would provide affordable health care to all Americans, which meant we had to put a brake on inflation in health care because health care was becoming unaffordable, the highest quality health care in the world. Nothing, in my view, I'd like to ask my colleagues, describes that more of how this whole plan would arrive than the so-called Class Act. Late in the debate, the Class Act was thrown in to provide long-term care for seniors, which seems like a worthy cause, but the whole thing was a gimmick. It was described by Senator Conrad, our distinguished chairman of the Budget Committee, called a Ponzi scheme of the first order, the kind of thing that Bernie Madoff would have been proud of. So they foisted that off on us because, why? Because initially, because of CBO scoring, that it would show an increase in finances into and revenues into the whole Obamacare program. But as soon as those people who were paying in became eligible, then obviously the reverse happened. Thank God for Senator Gregg, former senator of New Hampshire, who had an amendment adopted that said that it had to required the Secretary to certify that the program would be solvent over 75 years before the program could be implemented. If it hadn't been for that, the Class Act would be here today. And then in October, last October, the Secretary of Health and Human Services issued a report confirming that what many of us knew was inevitable, that the Secretary could not certify the Class Act solvency as required under law. So here we went through this exercise of frantically searching for ways to increase revenue, at least the way that CBO does scoring. So we did the Class Act, and thank God Senator Gregg of New Hampshire put an amendment that he had to certify that it would be viable over 75 years, and there's no way, not a snowball's chance in Gila Bend, Arizona, that they were going to ever be able to certify over 75 years that it was going to be a viable program. So it was kind of entertaining. Guess what? Late on a Friday night, the Secretary of Health and Human Services said that she could not certify that the program would be solvency throughout a 75-year period. So the result of this was, obviously, that they didn't have the false revenues that CBO could score. They didn't have a program that could provide long-term care for seniors. And again, as the senator from North Dakota aptly pointed out, this Ponzi scheme of the first order faced and met a well-deserved death. But that's why the American people, the overwhelming majority of the American people, disapprove of this whole exercise, disapprove of Obamacare. They want it repealed. They don't support it. And I'm proud to say that in this election we'll decide whether we repeal and replace Obamacare or not. And the American people care about it.
Summarize what the senator from Arizona has just said. The Class Act was sold to the American people as a budget deficit reducer. It was going to reduce the deficit. No sooner was it signed and they started looking at it that the administration itself said, we know it's unworkable and we abandon it. We're not even going to try to enforce it. That's the result.
Because they would have kept it on the books if it had not been for the amendment from the senator from New Hampshire that said that they had to certify that it would be solvent over a 75-year period. Now, if it hadn't been for that amendment, we would have the Class Act today, a Ponzi scheme in being where people are paying in, then that is scored as revenues, and then some years later when they retire, obviously the reverse would have been true. And I have yet to hear one of my colleagues come over and admit that they were wrong about the Class Act. I'd love to hear some of those who strongly advocated for it. My friend from Iowa, Senator Harkin, said, so we get a lot of bangs for the buck, as one might say, with the Class Act that we have in this bill. Senator Whitehouse said, certain colleagues on the other side of the aisle have argued that the class plan would lead to a financially unstable entitlement program and would rapidly increase the federal deficit. That is simply not accurate. I look forward to my colleagues who supported and voted for the Class Act to come over and agree that it was, as Senator Conrad pointed out, a Ponzi scheme.
I know our friend from South Dakota has joined us and is eager to join in this discussion, so I wonder if he has anything he'd like to add about the broken promises that were made during the passage of Obamacare.
Let me just say, before the senator, the point is, the whole point of reforming health care was to reduce the costs of health care. That was the goal. We all know we cannot sustain, Medicare cannot be sustained for the American people if the inflation associated with health care continues. So the whole object of this game was to reduce the cost of health care and preserve the quality of health care. Does anybody think that that was achieved with this legislation? That's why the American people have figured it out. I asked the senator from South Dakota.
Right. I'd just echo what the senator from Arizona has said about the Class Act. He was down here, as was I, and I think many of us, when we were debating this, to say this is a program that's destined to be bankrupt. And in fact, if you look at what even the independent Medicare actuary was saying, that was described, the Class Act was, as unworkable. And they said it would collapse in short order. Within the Health and Human Services Department, there was a nonpartisan career staff who privately called the class program, quote, a recipe for disaster, end quote. There was plenty of warning, advance warning, that this thing wasn't going to work, but as the senator from Arizona correctly pointed out, it was used as a gimmick to make the overall cost of this thing look less and therefore bring it into balance. We now know, of course, that the Class Act couldn't work. Even they've had to acknowledge that. And the amendment that was put on by the senator from New Hampshire, Senator Gregg, that forced them to certify made that abundantly clear. But to the senator from Mississippi's point, the whole purpose of the exercise was we've got to do something about the cost of health care. We've got to get health care costs down for people in this country. And in fact, the President of the United States, when he was running for president, said, and I quote, if you got health insurance, we're going to work with you to lower your premiums by $2,500 per family per year. And we will not wait 20 years from now to do it or 10 years from now to do it. We will do it by the end of my first term as President of the United States, end quote. I'm sure that the senator from Arizona probably remembers very well many of these statements. But the facts tell a different story, Madam President. If you look at what health care costs are doing and even what was predicted by the Congressional Budget Office, they said that the law was going to increase health insurance premiums by 10 to 13%. Which means that families purchasing coverage on their own were going to have to pay an additional $2,100 a year more because of the new law. And that's actually been borne out. If you look at the cost of health insurance for people in this country today, it's gone up, not down. It's gone up dramatically. since the President took office, about 25% for most Americans. And so all these promises about getting costs under control, all the promises about being able to keep what you have, all the promises about, you know, this being done in a way that would protect Medicare. We all know that Medicare was slashed to the tune, when it's fully implemented, of $1 trillion. And if you look at what the taxes that were imposed by this, $1 trillion in new taxes, the American people got a bad, bad deal. And they know it. And that's why the public opinion polls show that.
Senator from South Dakota, and maybe my other colleagues, even though we've shut down the office of the Class Act, even though the Secretary of Health and Human Services has said that they can't certify that it will be fiscally sustainable over 75 years, it's still on the books. Isn't the Class Act still on the books? Do you think that it might be appropriate, since we can't comply with the law, that maybe we could repeal that portion of the law? Would that be something we might think about? In fact, I think it might be a pretty good amendment.
Good amendment, and by the way, we have that amendment, and we'd be happy to offer it. We tried to call the bill up. It was objected to by the Democrats to get rid of it, because the bad thing about bad ideas around here is they tend to come back. And this is a bad idea that ought to be put away once and for all, and yet it is on the books, as the senator from Arizona has pointed out. I mean, I don't know why, after all the evidence out there now that has been put forward, including the Health and Human Services Secretary saying this will not work, we continue to maintain this on the books in hopes, I think, that for some, at least, in the administration, that it can be resurrected at some point in the future. But this is a bad idea. It was a bad idea then. It will be a bad idea in the future, because it just doesn't pencil out. You cannot make it work. The only thing it does is saddle future generations of Americans with massive amounts of debt.
Let me ask my colleagues about another promise. I know they're going to call time on us in just a few moments. Anybody recall hearing this statement from the President of the United States in 2009? If you like your health care plan, you'll be able to keep your health care plan, period. No one will take it away, no matter what. Unquote, the President of the United States, June 15, 2009. What happened to that one?
Well, take a look at it. Even the administration admits that that wasn't true. Small businesses, people that get their insurance through small businesses are going to have a very difficult time continuing to provide coverage for people because of the mandates, the Washington mandates that say you have to provide Washington-approved insurance. I mean, that's the problem, is that people have what they like. It may be something that they want, that they need, they can afford, and now they're being mandated to have something that they may not want, may not need, and may not be able to afford. So again, you have another broken promise, which is why Senator Coburn, who's practiced medicine for about a quarter of a century, and I practiced medicine for about a quarter century, have come out with a report released yesterday called Warning Side Effects, a checkup on the federal health law. Fewer choices. Well, that means people can't choose to even keep what they had. Fewer choices, higher taxes, more government, less innovation. None of those things are the things that the American people have been promised by the President.
In addition to that, could I ask, Senator, how many new regulations have been issued, and how many new regulations do we anticipate as a result of this?
Well, it looks that this over 2,000-page law is going to result in over 100,000 pages of regulations.
1,000
pages worth of regulations. I know there's one part of the law, a couple of pages, 4 to 6 pages. They had 400 pages of regulations and 50 pages of legal guidance. You talk to hospitals, and I know that those of us who travel and visit with hospitals in our states, they say, you know, we're spending money on consultants and lawyers to help us understand the law, and it's money we ought to be spending on patients and on equipment and on technology for our hospital to provide care in our community. And I know the senator from Kansas has visited over 100 hospitals in his state, and I think he's heard exactly the same thing.
Well, it's certainly true, and the point that was made earlier about the goal of this legislation of bending the cost curve down, it didn't do it. It doesn't do it. It can't do it. And that creates the problem that we now all face, is how do we have access to affordable health care if you're not reducing the cost of health care? And so the end result, in my view, is that Americans will have less options for their own plans. As employers, they will provide either less options or no options for employees. So the idea that you're going to keep what you have, that begins to disappear if you're employed, if you're a senior citizen, and Medicare has been your primary provider. Again, back to this idea we didn't bend the cost curve, so in order to make health care affordable, when the legislation fails to do that, we find other gimmicks to do that. And one of the things that this bill creates is IPAB, this independent, so-called independent agency that is going to make decisions about what is covered by your health care plan. And the goal will not be to be better quality health care. The goal of the IPAB will be to reduce expenditures. So as the promise was made that you get to keep what you have, it becomes something totally different than what you've experienced in your health care plan, either in your own private health care insurance or as a beneficiary of Medicare. And so even the president's own Medicare actuary estimates that the law will increase overall national health care expenditures by $311 billion during the first 10 years alone, and that private health care insurance premiums will rise 10% in 2014. So if we're complaining today about the increase in premium costs, there's more to come. 2014, the Medicare actuary says another 10% increase in your health care premiums. At the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, their economists found that the increasing growth rate in health care spending will occur in every sector of health care. And more recently, the Congressional Budget Office, our neutral provider of analysis, says the cost of the health care law may be substantially higher than earlier estimated. One of the things I would suggest that we should have done that never happened, if you want to keep what you have, if you want to have access to health care in rural and urban and suburban places in the country, one would think we would do something permanent about fixing the reducing payments to physicians, the so-called doc fix. One would have thought in health care reform that would have been front and center, because if you don't have a physician providing the service, you don't have health care. And yet we have a Medicare system that's going to reduce the payments. In fact, expected this year it would have reduced the payments to physicians 30%. The reality is that no longer will physicians accept Medicare patients, and that option that you were promised to keep what you have disappears one more time. In fact, town hall meeting Parsons, Kansas this year, physician on the front row says, "Senator, you need to know that I no longer accept Medicare and Medicaid. I will take cash, but I'm not able to afford to provide the services based upon the Medicare reimbursement rate that I get, and you add all the paperwork in trying to comply with Medicare and Medicaid, and it's no longer financially feasible for me in this small town to provide the services that my patients need under Medicare." We're going to see a lot less access because, once again, the failure, the promise that was made to bend the cost curve down, to reduce health care costs, to reduce premiums, was totally false.
So the promise was not to touch Medicare. That promise has not been fulfilled. The promise was to reduce the deficit